should men be banned from working in nurseries? We've got a lot to talk about. This is a dark subject and it's a tricky one for lots of different reasons. I understand that. However, we'll also move on to some other issues too. Steve Van Allen is with us, the comedian and the broadcaster, to talk about an array of issues, and we will start with this one, Steve. Just before we get into this, it's worth having a listen to what one of the detectives in charge of this case had to say. This is Lewis Basford. He's detective superintendent. Here's what he said in response to Vincent Chan being jailed.
He is a paedophile who preyed on the most vulnerable victims in child settings, both at primary schools and nursery establishments, where the time that he should have been nurturing and looking after those children, he committed the most vile offending.
Look, Steve, I don't know where you go with a story like this. I mean, it should, in many respects, if we were talking about any other kind of crime, we'd just file it under the, you know, there are some terrible people, and once in a while we do hear, regrettably, horrendous stories of this nature, and it could just be compartmentalised, not forgotten. I don't mean that to be reductive, but you just put it into that place, as we do with other horrible people. We don't think everyone's a murderer because a bloke that works in a supermarket murdered someone. This is very specific, however, and I think it does throw up that question about men working in these settings, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah, it does. I think you can't compartmentalise it like that, because the other question, the big part of this story, is what should be done as a preventative, preemptive measure. Because this is not just there are some people who are bad, we should send them to prison. Of course. I don't think anyone reads this story and doesn't think, like, good, and that key, let's not worry about how well we keep track of that when you hear how long these crimes went on for. And that's the other part of it. So you think about parents raising the alarm, and this is getting on for 2 decades that he was doing these crimes. If you are running that kind of childcare, you've kind of got one job, haven't you? And it's to keep the kids safe. I'm sure there are some other lower down the list ones, but that's job number one. And it is true that there are 2 types of people who wish to work with children. People who absolutely love nurturing and caring for children, and wrong-uns. And the one job of that industry is to filter it out. And it's such an important job that, of course, we have to talk about it and look at what questions should be asked. I don't think anyone would have a problem with saying all of these people who go anywhere near our kids should be background checked within an inch of their life. And that no one's going to complain about that. And if you are one of those caring, nurturing people who wishes to work with children to help them, you also will be thoroughly in favour of being background checked within an inch of your life. Yep. So I think we can get some sort of agreement there. And I know this is it's the cliche now, you know, now that I'm a parent, now I've got a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. So these kind of stories, you do think, I want to have a little look at background checking, make sure that we make sure that all these wrongers don't get anywhere near my kids. However, I wouldn't want to see men banned from childcare. We're actually also living in a time when there's kind of a crisis of no male role models for kids, especially for sons. And it's not going to help if we just ban all men from being anywhere near kids for a certain number of years. And I think
it's a weird one, isn't it? My little boy in reception, and this is only a couple of years ago when he started reception, his teacher was a male teacher, and thank goodness he was a male teacher. That particular school, I think he was the only male teacher. They really there was a male head, but you know, pretty much as with all primaries and reception classes, etc., it's nearly all women, and they need more men in education. Now, you could say, what's the difference between a classroom and a nursery? I think a nursery is perhaps a slightly more intimate setting. They change nappies in nurseries. They are slightly more contained in nurseries, as distinct from the openness of a school, perhaps. So it's difficult, and you also hardly see our little boy, both of them went to nursery school. I think the only time there was a bloke in the nursery was one of the women's sons who came there as sort of work experience for a couple of days. But generally speaking, it's all female. But would you raise an eyebrow if you walked in and there was, it was run by a couple of blokes?
Well, if it was entirely run by... Yeah, I already do raise an eyebrow. So where our son goes, same deal. All the teachers, they call them there at that level, they're all women. And there's one guy who has some other job who, delivers the fruit and stuff like that. And, yeah, I would be lying if I didn't say you keep an eye on it. You judge. But you're right to judge them, aren't you? Because, as you say, there is a material difference in the threat that are posed by the 2 types of people we're talking about, the men and the women. You wouldn't want to think that you've lowered your guard by banning all men. There you go, job done. Because then you also need to make sure you're checking the women as well. I still think thing, that it's good not to like raise kids from nursery age to not think that men exist. They have to, but we just have to check them more. We have to check them way more because we are more of a risk.
But the trouble is, I mean, somebody like this horrific character, Vincent Chan, had been checked. I mean, he'd gone through the I can't remember what it's called, the basic background check that you have if you work in any kind of scenario or setting with kids. So he'd gone through all of that. He worked at a primary school. Presumably at that time there was nobody had raised any issues around him. And, you know, I guess the problem with these kind of predators is that they are very clever at staying out of the gaze of others around. Yeah. Although there were parents, it seems, that over the last couple of years did flag that they felt there was an issue. I don't think they necessarily thought it was an issue like this, but they certainly knew that some of their kids were quite scared of going in because of this bloke.
I mean, the problem is, until someone's actually done something wrong, there won't be anything coming up in a background check. I get that. Background checks are fundamentally flawed because it's only when there's evidence to find a problem, problems have already happened. Here's what I don't understand, though. We're living in a world where we are CCTV'd up the wazoo, right? I don't know why you don't have some sort of a system where no one can be with children without it being recorded. Now, whether you can very much restrict who gets access to it because you just don't want it like be hackable, or people can just download pictures of kids getting their nappies changed. But if a parent comes up and said, I'm concerned about this childcare provider or teacher or whatever they're called, then you could check, which means you'd find out about him way before the 2 decades. You'd have found out about the woman you mentioned, because if someone says, you know, what I wanted to see, you get someone in authority can check the video. And it's also, if you knew that there's cameras everywhere, these wrong-uns wouldn't be doing wrong stuff in front of cameras. I imagine there's a massive deterrent effect of seeing that there's a camera up there.
And as I understand it, possibly specifically because of this recent story, and although there are others in recent months, but the government are now considering that to become a compulsory guide as part of running a nursery, and that would, you know, one would assume, bearing in mind what's at stake here, perhaps address a significant chunk of the problem. Steve, stay with us. We're going to talk some more to Steve and Alan in just a couple of moments. It is Talk, 22 minutes after 1 o'clock. Steve and Alan is with us. We're looking at the big stories of the day. And this one, Steve, Labour have opened the door to primary school kids changing their gender. Instructions drawn up by now Tory leader Kemi Badenoch forbade primary schools from changing pupils' pronouns, but the government's guidance has scrapped that ban, instead saying those as young as 4 should be able to fully social transition to the opposite gender. Let's have a listen, as a way of reminding us what some teachers think about this, to this little clip of a teacher explaining all of this to a bunch of kids a couple of years back.
Me Mux Fellows, they use they, them pronouns, and they know that's an expectation. First ever lesson I teach of any class. This is what I expect.
This is what, yeah, I'm not quite sure what he said, or she, I'm not sure. But listen, yes, so there is, I actually thought that was a completely different clip, which was my fault entirely. But nonetheless, it was the one, you know, the one where the teacher says there's 120 pronouns, kids, and then she starts to tell this little group of children. My error in that respect. Nonetheless, what are we making of this? The difference, I think, Steve, from other areas where this has come up, is the Education Secretary is saying that parents need to be consulted, and that's often been the missing part of the jigsaw.
Yeah, that's a bit that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Because if a child wishes to suddenly be a different gender, you'd think it might get mentioned to the parents rather than not done at all. But this, it's like being in 2023 again. It's like the old days when the trans stories are back. I struggle to really understand what this is about, because there's a world of difference between a 3-year-old and whatever happens in someone's life that you end up being like that actress Laverne Cox, right? Such a different... I'm not even really sure I understand what gender can mean to a 4-year-old, really. I know it's not just about your sexual orientation and things, but it feels that there's a sexual part of what a gender is. You know that scientist, Neil deGrasse Tyson? He was on a podcast once, and he described the difference between sex and gender so well that I started to understand it. And then for the rest of the piece, he thoroughly got mistaken between gender and sex. So if you wish to say there's a difference between gender and sex...
So even he's confused?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he made this really good argument about gender is some sort of, the signs you show to the world, whatever, right? And if that's the case, then single-sex spaces would be single-sex spaces. Because if you think that gender gives you access to a single-sex space, you've just confused gender and sex. Already, this is an absolute mess. What I do know is that when you're dealing with a kid, and this is social transitioning, which is basically just changing the words you use. I think that's a fancy euphemism for pretending, which is what a lot of 4-year-olds do. So the issue here is how much does the school go along with it? Because kids call yourself whatever you want. I know it seems like a flippant cliche of an example, but my son every so often thinks he's a member of Paw Patrol. Now, I don't actually have to think he's always Chase.
Chase.
Wouldn't be great if it was Ryder, obviously, but it's not stupid.
Chase on the case. Whereas Sky's person non grata in our house back in the day.
Really? Well, that would be a gender, at least my son is a good boy. It's a very good boy. But the point is, so social transition is pretending, kids pretend. How much does a school go, kids pretend, or this is official and we need to get some paperwork involved? And I don't think that second part is right. I don't think that needs to happen at all. And the slight worry is this news is opening the door to that being a thing, isn't it?
Well, also, there was a story the other day where the actor or actress Olivia Colman said she thought she was a bit non-binary or something. I think she was asked about it because I think she's playing a character. The whole non-binary thing, that's a whole crock of nonsense we could look at another. It's just an invented term for people who want to either, they might be bisexual, call themselves non-binary, which again is conflating gender and sexuality, perhaps. But when I say, I don't know what it's, I don't feel like a man or a woman. Well, I wouldn't know what it's like to feel like a woman, so I wouldn't know I didn't feel like a woman. So we can cancel that out for a start, right? And as for feeling for a man, feeling like a man, does that mean one day I might think, well, I haven't got that kind of macho, come on, boys, I haven't got that going on. So does that mean, which is Finn on a Friday night, does that mean that I'm somehow non-binary? Because I'm not Vinnie Jones, and he's sort of alpha male, although I'm a bit tasty on the eye and clearly a bloke, but, I'm not Vinnie. I'm not Danny Dyer in that respect.
Yeah. To the general wider point, you're absolutely right. In your specific case, you are non-binary. But in general, I think you bang on it. This is exactly the point. This is one of the strictest adherence to social expectations I've ever heard of come from any group. The idea that I don't thoroughly match what I think society expects of a man, therefore I can't be in that category. I look at it this way. So I know that I'm a man, and whatever I do, therefore, becomes something that men do. That's the way it works, isn't it? If I wish to enjoy the works of the musicals, if I sit around singing along to My Fair Lady, tough, whatever it is, that's now what men do, because I'm a man and I do it. And that just feels like surely that's the freedom that we should have been aiming towards through the 80s, 90s. I thought, this is where society's going. Do whatever you want, mate. But that's not what we've got now. We've got, no, if you don't stick to this predefined list of things that a gender would have, you've got to opt out. You've got to be non-binary because you don't fit the little archetype.
Indeed. That routine you know about it raining in Spain, by the way, is fantastic. Can I just say that? I love it.
And it's true.
It's true. What about this? Angela Rayner, Andy Burnham have called for more tax support for pubs. This seems to be not a coincidence that both of them are on the same kind of page on this, particularly after this week's events in Westminster. Let's have a listen to what the former deputy leader had to say.
I would support the government in having a named minister with responsibility for the nighttime economy to champion the sector inside government and ensure that the voices of small and medium businesses are heard loud and clear.
Yeah, she was in government, but let's just park that for a second. But there she is now, nighttime economy, VAT breaks for pubs, Andy Burnham's backing her up. Is this just a coincidence, or are they are they on manoeuvres, shall we say, Steve?
Nothing will be a coincidence at the moment. With all of the news about how long Keir Starmer's got left, there is no one who's a top name in the Labour Party that's not thinking, you never know, this could be me. It's understandable. If you were anywhere near it, you'd suddenly think, not ordinarily, I wouldn't cause trouble, but I might get the top job. If you're that level of politician, they all want the top job and they've smelt blood. But they're right. I like this as a news story because the Labour Party should be paying more attention to pubs because it kind of gets them a bit closer to being a Labour Party that thinks about working class people. Wouldn't that be nice for there to be a political party that actually looks after the wishes of working class people? And you know what? If you're working class, you enjoy a pub a bit. Obviously, Angela Rayner, we know she enjoys a drink. Most pictures in the Daily Mail of her and a pedalo having a swift shandy. But No, that's right. Of course we should be looking at this. The problem with what they're doing at the moment, what Rachel Reeves is doing, is getting a bit close to killing the golden goose, isn't it? The fact that they think, oh, there's an industry there, we can milk more money out of it. There comes a point when you actually just shut down that industry, then your economy's smaller, and then you have to sit in the Houses of Parliament crying.
Indeed. Let's move to this story. It's a little beauty, this one. North Korea. We don't often do much news from North Korea, Steve, and I think, frankly, shame on us because there's rich pickings over there in the communist state. South Korea's National Intelligence Service told Parliament, so they're spying on the other one, that Kim Jong-un has chosen his daughter, Kim Ju-ae, who's 13, to be his heir. They cited her growing public profile at official events and possible appearances at 5 yearly party congress, whatever that means. Anyway, they're suggesting that this really hasn't been written that well for me, has it? Basically, his daughter is going to be taking over, and she's only 13.
Yeah, I mean, this is another bad piece of news for the Labour Party. We're going to find out that North Korea has a female leader before the Labour Party have ever managed it. That's a bad look. When the People's Republic of North Korea eventually, it's not looking great for them, is it? Also, what a stupid move. 13-year-old girls, have they never seen the film Carrie? As if that nation doesn't have enough of a problem. If their leader is going to be a 13-year-old girl in a regime where you are pretty much allowed to be as harsh as you wish to be, it's going to get even tougher for them over there, isn't it?
She made, apparently, her first appearance when she was just 8 years old, when she was sent out to inspect an intercontinental ballistic missile, and often makes appearances walking beside her dad. So you might have seen her on the walkabouts. She's the new head of North Korea.
Yeah, but she's also taller than her dad, which is so embarrassing for everyone. I mean, look, I'm not a short man. I know some people have sensitivity about this, but have you got a daughter who's taller than you at 13, you'd keep her indoors. It's very much a nation where you can keep people indoors. Do you know what I mean? He's got the power. He's wiped out a few members of his family, so this could be happening. But it is interesting. In a society where you think that we're always going to be patriarchal, the daughter gets the gig. You know, what a modern thing.
Indeed. Well, it's fair to say, I've been talking about height. His dog, Kim Jung-shep, apparently is also taller than him, so, you know, he's not alone in that. It's a height issue for poor old Kim. Steve.
So close to making a joke about that not being a pet, it's the meal, but I'm not going to do it, because that's...
Listen, Steve, always great to see you. Have a cracking weekend, Steve. Steve and Alan.